What's up everybody, Setzer here with another Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia video, and today, doing next up in my video how-to guide series, and this one's how to Setzer, Final Fantasy VI Gambler Extraordinaire, and in this game he is your quintessential utility unit. So he brings his debuff Freeze, which still, even if you fast forward through JP, doesn't exist in the game anywhere else, which completely prevents an enemy from gaining any Brave for 2 of its turns. So that's most commonly what he's known for. But he also brings knockback, some auras, and some battery to the party. You're not going to use him as your primary support, but when stacked with other auras or buffs, he gets that part of the job done in a party. He also is a really good friend unit, and if you're new to the game and you don't yet have like an AoE farmer for things like the WOI token quest or the level 70 daily quests, he is great for that as well. And so what we're going to do is, in the way these videos usually go, they kind of have 3 parts. One, we do sort of a deep dive into their actual kit, and then I'll talk about some party comps that they tend to work really well in. And then lastly, I'll go ahead and walk you through what some gameplay with Setzer tends to look like, and hopefully give you some tips and tricks that will help. And so as always, this is the DFFOO supports our cool spreadsheet that CobraCai does a really nice job keeping updated for the community. Link is in the description below. I highly recommend you use it when you're working on party comps and analyzing units kits. So we're going to start with Freeze Joker, right? So this is his S1, and before I get into the damage and everything, I do want to mention that it does grant the party 3 turns of the generic max Brave Plus buff at 20%. But I will say he only has 3 uses of Freeze Joker, and the duration of this is only 3 turns. On top of that, in this game, whenever you get the same buff, stronger buffs overwrite weaker ones. So the combination of those 3 things, and I almost pretend like this doesn't exist when I'm building a party around them. If you're just looking at his auras alone, he brings 30% attack, 50% max Brave, and 20% speed. So that's kind of where I view his party contribution in terms of buffs and auras, so keep that in mind. But what the actual ability does is, first off, it's going to do a nice battery your party. It raises their Brave by 50% of his own max Brave, and then it does a 150% potency group magic Brave with the group HP attack split evenly. If there is just one unit in play, or one enemy in play, then it's got the 1.6 multiplier. And then the big thing is it gives 2 turns of freeze, which prevents an enemy from gaining any Brave. So the fact that it's a lockdown ability that has 2 turn duration instead of 1 is really nice. And what does it do? So what are the most dangerous attacks in this game? Generally are the Brave plus HP attacks, right? Well, if you're hitting for the Brave damage, but you're not gaining any Brave, that HP attack that follows it isn't going to do any damage. So I'll show you that in the actual gameplay showcase here. But yeah, it's super powerful, but there's only 3 uses of it. So it's not something that you're going to just go into a fight and haphazardly be using. You generally kind of want to plan. You're like, hey, I'm going to use it at this point to lock down this ability, etc. It's a more effective way to use it, and that's really how to get the most out of them. Next up is his S2. This is Red Card, which grants himself a 6-turn attack plus 20% buff and a 6-turn max Brave buff. So he does have his own generic max Brave and attack buffs. So something to keep in mind when you're building party with them. And because these are 6 turns as opposed to 3, and he has ways to sort of refresh them as well whenever he uses ZX, he can keep these up full time really easily. Now the attack itself, it's one of those sort of low potency, high volume attacks. It's 3 42 potency attacks and then dumps the HP, and it does that 3 times. It also delays the target by a turn. So anytime you've got these types of attacks that are high volume, low potency, their kits really benefit from attack. And he also has his Brave Plus Plus, which is kind of like this as well. So you definitely want to give him an attack because of stuff like this. And there's really nice self-synergy between his Freeze Joker and his Red Card, because anytime you're locking down an ability like Freeze Joker does, or maybe Paralyze or Silence abilities like that, the less turns the enemy has, the higher percentage of their turns, they're sort of locked down for. And when you're knocking enemies back, you're going to reduce the amount of turns that they have in a fight, compared to the amount of turns that you have. So aside from being a good damage ability, the knockback really synergizes well with freeze, and that's something to keep in mind when putting together parties with him too. So any additional knockback or any additional lockdown capabilities are really going to make for a strong party where the enemy's going to have a hard time being dangerous. So next up, we're going to talk about his C65. This is all boost up. This is party max brave 20% for 5 turns. So this is not one of the stronger C65s we'll see. I will say, because it's only max brave and there's no attack component to it, I would recommend trying using it earlier in the fight, right? When the enemy's defenses get high towards the end, you're not hitting as hard, so it's harder to even hit your brave caps. Whereas, on the first half of the fight, before the defenses go up, that's a little bit easier. So if you can remember to do it, and sometimes it's difficult, I know I forget myself, this is one you might want to use maybe like right when the last wave starts, and then again before a summon, or something like that, to try and sort of maximize the extra damage that you're getting because of it. But now we're going to go ahead and talk about his EX, Prismatic Flash. And what this does is, first, it gives him his framed buff, Blackjack, which is his own attack and max brave up, and then party attack and max brave as well. It's 7 hits, 40 potency each, group magic, brave attack, and it has the 1.6 multiplier when attacking a single target. But it has this unique component to it, in that what it does is, after it does the brave attacks, but before it does the HP dump, it raises the party brave up to the highest current brave of anybody in the party. Well, after he does 7 hits on the group brave attacks, who's going to have the highest brave in the party at that given time? It's going to be Setzer. So in essence, what he does is he fills up the other 2 party members' brave, and then he dumps his HP with the HP attack. So this is really great for powering up, your other units' HP attacks. It's a way to keep them safe if they're being targeted, especially with how quickly Prismatic Flash comes up by the time you 3 out of 3 them, which I'm going to talk about him in terms of 3 out of 3, by the way. I mean, at this point, I know when Chaos started, we were really conserving our ingots. You didn't have a lot of them, you didn't have a lot of units, and you were trying to get through fights with, little expenditure as possible. But I think at this point, intelligent minds disagree, but I'm either going to 3 out of 3 units I want to play, or 0 out of 3 units I don't want to play, and maybe, take the ingot, and maybe try and slot them into, one entropy battle and call it a day. So we'll talk about him in terms of 3 out of 3. And at 3 out of 3, he gets increased speed recharge on the EX. So this is huge. It really allows you to go from one ability right into his EX again, which is really nice, or 2 of his brave or HP++ attacks. But he also, his self-buff changes a little bit to where, in addition to what it already gave, it adds some brave regen for himself, as well as a 50% extra damage whenever critical hits are done. So he does more damage when enemies are already broken, and he's criticling. Again, this really helps the low potency of his attacks. On top of that, he gets sort of the Brave++ and HP++ attacks. And his are a little bit unique, so I'm going to have to talk about those here for a second. So his Brave++, it's a 4-hit, 160 potency total, so 440 potency attacks. And at the end of it, as long as his Brave is 80% of his max Brave, it's going to dump and do HP damage. So you got to be careful with this. It's not going to keep you safe like a lot of Brave attacks would, especially when it's not the very end of the fight and those attacks are hitting harder. On the other hand, his HP++ is a 1-hit range Brave attack after it raises his self-Brave 50% of his attack, and then it refunds 30% of the HP damage dealt. So he basically has cashback, but the cashback on the HP attack is 30%. That's pretty significant. So in essence, he kind of does the opposite of what other units do. Brave++ if he actually wants to dump it, and HP++ if he wants to keep himself safe, which is really nice because he doesn't have to maybe waste a couple turns in a fight doing a Brave only attack to keep himself safe. So cashback is always really nice, and 30% on an HP attack is actually a really potent amount of cashback. So that's kind of how the EX plus works. I will say, even though his Brave++ and his HP++ don't have their own overflow, as part of his 3 out of 3, he gets max Brave overflow 20%. This is all the time. So he always has 20% overflow on his ability. So even though they don't have their own specifically, because he has that sort of trait, just keep that in mind, in that, your abilities always do have the 20% overflow. And obviously more on the abilities that have their sort of own innate overflow. So I need to talk a little bit about his C50 as well. He has this all-in ability, which basically what that does is whenever so keep in mind, again, 3 uses of Freeze Joker. Whenever he uses it twice, his self-attack, max brave, eye brave defense, and speed all go up by a significant margin, 30%. So keep that in mind, because that makes an actual difference, especially if you've used 2 of the abilities and then you're maybe saving 1 for at some point in the last little bit of the fight. Those extra stat increases that he gets through the end of that fight are significant. In terms of his actual artifacts, so he's going to want Attack 108. This is pivotal for him with all of these abilities and with these low potencies, but the high volume of attack. And Brave 330, he has his battery, on his S1 is based on his max brave. His EX is going to cap, so it'll avoid leakage on that. So, like a lot of DPS units, even though he is a utility unit, you're going with Attack 108 and max brave 330 next. I will say that he does have, so that C50 that I mentioned, that all-in, he can increase that by 5% per artifact. So there's the all-in boost 2-star. Now, I would recommend, I don't value that nearly as much as I do the Attack 108 or the Max Brave 330, but if you happen to get one, let's say on an Attack 108 as the secondary, you can use it. Or if maybe you want to keep one in the kitty, so maybe you're going into a fight where the first wave is more dangerous and you're going to have them used early. So there are situations where maybe you could plan it around that you would gain more use of that, and then maybe you swap in that all-in boost 2-star, in a situation like that. And again, great friend unit here because of this recharge. You could go like freeze, prismatic flash, freeze, prismatic flash, freeze, or sort of alternate those the other way. All right, and so next up, we're going to talk about some party compositions that he works really well in. And really, whenever I think of a prime teammate for him, the first one that I think about is Y'shtola. She has the rechargeable stone, which means she's got a ton of knockbacks. So when you combine that with his knockbacks and freeze, you really can, prevent an enemy from doing any damage to you for quite a while. On top of that, he doesn't heal, she heals. He doesn't bring enough auras to the party to be a full support, but when you combine it with hers, you've got plenty of support there. I think 30 attack for him, 40 for her, so that's 70, and then considerably more on the Max Brave, and she actually brings the Max Brave generic buff too. So whatever unit you put in this slot right here, that does damage, it's going to be a decent party. I mean, you could put in a favorite here. There's very few units who aren't going to work with Setzer and Y'shtola. With that being said, the one that jumps to mind as just being a power party is if you throw Ultimisi in there. So you're already limiting their turns. When you combine Ultimisi's ability to just do mass amounts of damage and loop her EX so that the enemy isn't really getting that many turns, and then when it does, it's frozen. This is a really strong party right here that is capable of crushing content for quite a while. I mean, short of maybe being resistant to one of the damage types here, that's a great party. But another great party and a great duo for him is Lilithset. So if you remember, he has the trait where he does more damage on critical hits. Well, Lilithset, one of the things that she brings to the table is, as part of her buff set, is that she actually gives the party 100% critical hit rate. This is massive for Setzer, because that means whenever the enemy isn't broken and he's not critting yet, he's going to be hitting that same high number with the normal crit multiplier and then his extra crit multiplier, doing damage. So I'll show you a little bit here. I think this is the one that I'll use when we get into the actual gameplay showcase. Really actually makes his Brave++, almost act like a lot of units S1s. And there's no heals right here with Setzer and Lilithset, so I'm tossing in Agrius. Now you have ultimate lockdown, right? You've got Setzer hitting harder because of Lilithset. You've got paralyzes and silence that you can alternate with your freezes to really keep an enemy locked down. On top of that, all 3 of these units have auras, right? So everybody is buffed up sufficiently. So really nice party right here that could, handle, a lot of stuff. And then lastly, we talk about how his attack is so important to his kit, right? Because he's got the, the low potency, high volume hits. Well, anytime you're looking for attack and you don't have a generic, attack buff on your own, Sarah's always, top of mind because she's going to increase your attack by 100%. That's more than any unit in the game, can impact your attack. So really nice partner with Setzer. And on this party, I'm putting him with Zach. Zach's going to be here as a sweet tank in a month or two. It does a lot of damage. He will also benefit from, what Sarah brings to the table. Hyper buffed combined between Setzer and Sarah. And on this party, there's actually so much attack here because Zach has attack auras too. I'm gonna, use Ramu instead of maybe a Shiva or an Ifrit to take advantage of that attack and, really up the max Brave to avoid leakage. So those are 3 different party comps and ways that I think that you can use Setzer really well with different units. For the showcase here, I'm actually going to go into Bosch's event. I think it's a good one to kind of give you a little bit of gameplay. And I'll go ahead and use the little set party here to kind of show you, how her critical hit rate bonus really helps out Setzer. So I'm going to go ahead and get started right here. And again, the purpose of this is not to win the fight, right? I'm not making optimal decisions throughout the fight. I'm just trying to set up some things so that I can sort of show you some things and highlight some of what Setzer can do. And so we have everybody's favorite. I am going to steal all of your HP worms that we see a lot as mid-bosses in earlier waves of some fights. So we're going to go ahead and just sort of get my initial thing started here. And then actually this is perfect. So remember, right, so Lilith gives 100% crit. And his Brave attack is 4, 40 potency hit. So 40 potency hit, it's not strong, right? It's a low amount. So keep in mind, I'm outside of synergy here, right? I do that on purpose so that, there's not any inflated statistics when you're watching through the fight. And, on top of that, this is a chaos level battle, right? So I'm not fighting some, some Cosmos or EX level trash. So how much damage do you think his Brave Plus Plus will do right now? Again, 4 hits, 40 potency, and it's going to dump into HP. So it just did nearly 9k a pop, so literally 36k of Brave damage there. You saw all of that damage. That's from a Brave Plus Plus, right? So that's pretty much what a lot of other units S1s will do. So you keep that in mind as you're playing them. Now, obviously, at the end of a fight, their defenses are going to be higher, and it's not going to output that much damage. But especially for him, you kind of want to conserve his abilities anyway. So that is a great way to conserve abilities throughout the fight, is really just rely on that Brave Plus Plus when he's not being targeted to output decent damage. So, here we have, they're both coming up with that all attack. So if you're not familiar with Freeze Joker, I'm just going to go ahead and show you right now because we have some HP attacks coming, right? So we're going to go ahead and Freeze Joker. So notice right now they have no Brave. They've got that debuff, the snowflake looking thing on the right, that's Freeze. And, they're about to do their, AoE HP attack. And I know for a lot of people who are doing this fight, it actually posed a little bit of a problem because they'd get into the next wave, they'd finish the fight and realize that they missed, the HP requirement from the HP, damage that was sort of done prior to the HP drop that happens on the next wave. So I'm just going to go ahead and HP attack here with Lilith set, battery everybody up, and then watch these attacks now. So it does the group gravity spin. It still does, right, the attack, but it doesn't do any damage because they're not able to increase their Brave the way they normally do before they do it. Completely neutralizes these guys. Probably well worth the use of a freeze in this fight. So something to keep in mind, whenever you're deciding, hey, is Setzer going to be useful? He very well might be. So here's his EX. So this is Prismatic Flash. Watch Agrius right now. It's basically there's gonna be a break right here, plus 35k. So this is gonna bring Agrius from 0 to cap. See? While doing damage. And again, considering how fast it recharges, which I'll show you here, when we get into the actual next wave as well. It's a big asset in terms of Setzer's kit. So right here, I will go ahead and just show you his Brave Plus Plus again, because I don't think this really can be undersold. So keep in mind, he has his own innate, 20% Max Brave overflow buff, and then he's getting some from Lilith as well. So he's all the way down at 13k Brave right now. His Max Brave is 35k. So I'm going to use my Brave attack plus here, and it's going to go over cap. Look, all the way up at 47k damage, from a Brave plus plus. So again, don't forget that that's in his kit, because most of the other characters in the game, aren't using their Brave plus pluses for damage. So it makes him a little unique. Just got to remember to use it that way. So we'll go ahead and just get this wave here finished off. And look, that was a second round of all of those, attacks doing 0 damage to us. So strong. Now, for Lilith, this is the ability that actually, after it falls off initially, gives the guaranteed crit backup. So if you are partying, with her, don't forget to do that pretty much when it's up. Keep an eye, because she doesn't have the fastest recharge on her EX. So now, if you notice so I've done 2 after the last prismatic flash. I've done 2 non-ability uses, right, with the Brave plus pluses. So he's probably going to have his EX up right now. It's usually about how his rotation works. It's 1 ability or 2 of his Brave HP attacks, which is a really quick recharge. And what I recommend is, when you're playing him throughout the fight, try and live off of the Brave and the HP plus through the early parts of the fight. And the reason is, whenever he gets to the end of a fight, all of his stuff is really good for the end of a fight, right? Massive battery to your party members from his EX helps when you're, you're dealing with those defenses. Knockback when the enemy is more dangerous. Freeze when they're more dangerous. So I highly recommend getting him to the end of the fight with a good, maybe 4 of those abilities left, depending on exactly, what it is that you need, so that he can just chain them, and he's really help through the end of the fight. Now here, we've got this all attack coming. We know that it's going to be an HP attack, and I'm going to sort of save Agrius's Judgment Blade for the, the 80% mark here, when that ability can be silenced, and we'll use Freeze Joker to get me to that point. So now, you can see here, as he does, the all attack. For the scrubs here to go first. I actually have 2 attacks that come up, so it'll be a little while. But we'll go ahead and just use the EX again. Again, so fast on the recharge, really nice. And obviously we're splitting the damage here, but if there's just one target, it has that 1.6 multiplier again. So see here, he still has 2 turns of the Snowflake. That's all us. Go ahead and get her buffs recharged and do a little bit of damage. Alright, so now watch this attack. So you've got boom, nothing, right? And then now you're doing the single target here, so you're not so worried about it, but it's up anyway. So we're going to go back into the Brave plus plus, and look, we're still hitting 7,700, 54k damage, from a Brave plus plus ability. Think about your unit's HP plus attacks. How much damage are they doing with it? Probably not that much. Now again, part of that is because I have him partied here with Lilith, which greatly helps that, especially if the enemy's not broken. But that's why you pair party members together. It's for good synergy. Now I'm being attacked here with an all attack, so we'll go ahead and do the HP plus. And see, I just avoided myself from being broken by a hair. So super nice. Now let's just go ahead and Judgment Blade. And we'll go through just sort of, maybe one more round of attacks here, and then we'll go ahead and show you sort of what kind of damage he's capable of, during the summon. So we'll go ahead and Prismatic Flash right here, before he sort of summons all of his friends for the single target damage, and to battery up, my other 2 units. And I do want to mention as well, if you have him as a friend unit, or if you're bringing him in as a friend unit, I really kind of have 2 choices. You can either Prismatic Flash, Freeze, Prismatic Flash, Freeze. This one is going to do more damage. The downside is, you might lose a turn of Freeze by having it not being the last ability he casts. So from a damage perspective, that's kind of how you would do it. If you're more worried about the lockdown while just doing a good amount of damage anyway, then you sort of put the freeze first. You go freeze EX, freeze EX, or that first one could even be a red card, and then you end with a freeze, and then that way you're not losing any turns of the debuffs, potentially after he leaves. So that's kind of how you use them here for friend usage. So for the summons, don't forget to use his C65 and get the max Brave up. I haven't shown you his red card yet, so I will go ahead and do that right here. Because again, it's the sort of 3 hits with the dumps after it. So this will probably do close to 100k right here, right now, with the 60k max Brave. So the first one will probably just get a little bit short of the 60. It's 58, 23, 23. So really nice damage there, from red card, while also having the utility of the knockback. And then I think Lilith sets EXs up. So we'll go ahead and obviously do that so that everybody takes advantage of the battery there as well. And then we'll show you the sort of EX damage. Unfortunately, it's going to do the split damage, but you can kind of add it up and figure out that's how much it would have done every, right? 120k, so that means that would have hit 99k on a single target. So not somebody that you're going to want to sub out necessarily during the summon, unless you're maybe doing it from an ability conservation standpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the video here. I hope you learned something. If you pulled for Setzer, enjoy playing him. He comes on a really nice banner, so you'll get some other toys to play with as well. And have a nice day, everybody.